What's up, everybody? Will Hamilton here. Now, I hope you've got a Kindle, a Barnes & Noble Nook, something like that, because there's this new book out. It's by Novak Djokovic. It's called How to Beat Rafael Nadal, coming to an online store near you. So you can download it. You can keep this joke running, even though it's not really that funny anymore. But, you know, that's what I do. I just get up here and I embarrass myself. So, yeah, with that in mind, let's talk about this matchup and how Novak has been able to beat Rafa the last couple times they played, 4 times in a row, twice on hard, twice, more importantly, on a clay court. So, you know, we're obviously leading into the French Open. I've got my French Open threads on. Thank you, Mom and Dad. They were there last year, so I was kind of jealous, but whatever. Anyway, so, you know, you got to say that Novak's the favorite going into the French Open, just, you know, by virtue of the results. And really, the recent matchups, to me, have come down to court positioning. And it's a battle for court positioning. Now, neither one of these guys is going to knock the other one off the court with a particular shot. You know, you look at like Rafa, if we put Fed down here, Rafa's forehand breaks Federer's backhand down. And Rafa's forehand, that's not to say his forehand's not better than Djokovic's backhand. These guys do have slight edges in terms of their shot-making matchups, but it's not so big that they can sort of rely on that stuff to win the match. It really comes down to jockeying for court positioning and moving the ball around the court. So when we talk about that, let's first address these player icons, which are kind of confusing. These are not tennis rackets. Circle's the player, stick is the side the player's hitting on, forehand for righty, backhand for righty up here. This is a forehand for a lefty, backhand for a lefty. I don't know why we haven't changed our icons yet. I guess we're just trying to confuse people because that's what we do at FYB. Anyway, so you would get, you know, if you had this forehand to backhand exchange, Djokovic is cool getting into an exchange like this for a little while. Certainly, this is a losing proposition over the long run for Djokovic, but he can hang in better than like a Federer can. And the reverse is true for Novak's forehand and Rafa's backhand. Rafa's backhand is very good, but Djokovic's forehand has really stepped it up recently. So what you end up having is actually just the main exchange that's super important in my view is this backhand to backhand exchange down the line. And the initial battle over court positioning is not lateral, it's vertical. Now, when you typically think of the court positioning, you're like, oh, hit the guy, you know, get the guy off the court, right? I mean, so people tend to think of the court positioning as the lateral positioning and not as much the vertical, but the vertical is actually super important because it allows you to exploit someone laterally. If you move into the court, your vertical positioning becomes better. Now you have more angles to pull people off the court. And that's what you see in this backhand to backhand exchange, because these guys will go down, maybe they're making contact at this vertical depth, obviously just sort of arbitrary, but these guys are going to set up shop at some depth behind the baseline during a neutral rally. Now, Novak's got a little bit better of a backhand than Rafa, so that means Rafa is going to hit a little bit shorter sooner than Djokovic. So Djokovic now steps in and can crack this ball cross court just like that. And even though he's going at Rafa's forehand, he has that angle he can generate, and he's got an awesome ability to turn on those balls, have a ton of pace on it. And he's hitting a really big shot at Rafa's forehand. So Rafa's in bad shape now. He's on the run. He's got to hit a really high-quality shot because he can't leave it hanging in the middle of the court. Then Novak just gets that forehand, open court, points over. So Rafa's got to hit a sweet down-the-line running forehand or bring this thing cross-court deep into the corner. Both of those hard to do when you're on the run and you're dealing with a really well-struck ball. So this is the primary exchange that Djokovic uses to take control of many of these rallies. Now, when you talk about some of the other exchanges you see, the really cool thing about the Rafa-Novak matchup is that while you do have this down-the-line protracted exchange, this is typically the one you see go on the longest in terms of each player being content to go back down the line. Whenever you get a forehand to backhand rally, so it could be like this, or it could be like this. The guys change direction a lot. They, in a situation like this, Rafa is not a huge fan of this exchange here. So if Djokovic hits one cross court, Rafa will look for an opportunity to go down the line, and then you've got the same situation in reverse when it's Rafa's forehand coming across court to Djokovic. He'll go line like that pretty frequently. Obviously not all the time. They're certainly happy to go back cross court, but when they get an opportunity, they're going to try and redirect the ball. So the matches are really won not on who is going to make a mistake first, because the last couple matches they play, the rallies have gone on 10 to 15 shots. It's really who can use the court positioning best, who can move the guy around the court, push them behind the baseline a little bit, and then get back, push them back and then hit to the open court, and that's how they win the point. So it's been a really fascinating matchup to see how these guys work the ball around the court to do that. And Djokovic obviously has been doing it better. So with the Rome final, what you hadn't seen in the previous matches at Indian Wells, Miami, and then Madrid is, Rafa was just hitting sort of his standard shots, but particularly on the backhand side, Rafa started to get a lot of air under the ball. So he would get pulled wide, and then he would hit, he literally, not quite a lob, but this big loopy backhand. And what's that going to do here? Why would a pro hit a shot like that? Well, there's two reasons. One, with a big loopy, if you're off the court, you hit this loopy ball, you have more time to get back into good position, right? So if you're over in the corner and you rip the ball, then your opponent just knocks it over there, and you might be, here somewhere by the time your opponent makes contact. If you loop it, then you might be back, here or over, somewhere in better position. The other thing this does, if we kind of take the side view, is a high trajectory ball bounces up really high. So it's going to get way higher than a lower trajectory ball. And that's sort of the Rafael Nadal special, right? I'm going to get the ball high in someone's strike zone, and they're going to have trouble handling it. So a lot of players, to deal with this type of shot, actually back up and take it when the ball's on the way down. Now, when you do that, that means when you back up, your vertical court positioning not quite as good. So that takes away a lot of the angles you're able to generate, and it gives, when you back up, now Rafa would get even more time. So he gets the time when the ball's traveling over, and then if the opponent backs up, he gets even more time to get himself back into good court positioning. Djokovic, well, it didn't work against him. Djokovic just stood up, and he either took it up here or he took the ball on the rise. And so his vertical court positioning was still great, and he was, even though Rafa was in slightly better position, he was still able to go to the open court and have Rafa slightly out of position, right? And more importantly, be able to turn on these balls and hit quality shots. So next time you watch these guys play, hopefully we'll see them in the French Open final. Watch how these guys hit certain shots to either exploit the other guy's court positioning in other words, they're trying to attack, they're trying to get their opponents out of position, or they hit a particular shot to allow themselves to get back into position. And if they hit a shot that is designed to get them back into position, see how the other guy adjusts to not allow that to happen. So, again, in other words, Rafa's hitting that loopy ball to allow him to get back into good court position. Djokovic, he's stepping up. He's taking that early because he's not going to let Rafa get away with that. So very fascinating matchup here in terms of the strategies these guys are using. Again, it doesn't come down to really one guy trying to break another guy's shot down. Like you'd have a Rafa, just everybody knows this, Rafa to Fed's backhand. That's, Fed's going to lose those pretty much every day of the week, right? But with this, it's much more even in terms of the backhand to forehand exchanges. So it becomes more about the court positioning. And it's pretty interesting to see how, even over the last couple matches, it's only been 4 matches, how these guys have been trying to adjust, and particularly Rafael Nadal, because in the first couple matches he was still happy to go down the line because that's the typical exchange he sets up with a righty, you know, backhand to backhand, and then Rafa's gonna run around and try and hit a forehand into the open court, or he's you know, gonna wait for his opponent to go over there, and then Rafa, whatever, he can run over here and exchange, you know, set up the forehand to backhand exchange. Djokovic hasn't allowed, you know, Djokovic has kind of figured out that that basic strategy that Rafa has been implemented. He's figured out how to attack it. So now Rafa has to make some adjustments here and to try and counteract what Djokovic is doing to him. So it's sort of like how Fed had to make some adjustments to figure out how to play Rafa. Fed had to get away from that slice backhand, for example, and earlier in the career, Fed was more content to go backhand to forehand. Now Fed just tries to check out. So interesting to see how when a guy gets figured out, how that player now tries to adjust to kind of counteract what guys have figured out, you know, what to do. So with that in mind, you know, today is Saturday and the French Open starts tomorrow. I am super excited. Again, I've got my my attire ready to go. But please let me know what you think of this video below. I'm going with Djokovic for the French Open over Rafael Nadal, and you know, that would certainly change the dynamic of the men's tour. It's already a little bit different with Federer coming down, but that would really be interesting to see Djokovic, kind of this meteoric rise in about 6 months. So with that in mind, please leave me your comments. There's a like button somewhere. Facebook, please click that if you think I know what I'm talking about. If you don't, then Facebook hasn't invented a dislike button, but if they do, you should click it, or whatever, when they make it. All right, well, with that in mind, I'm actually going to play tennis, so I'm going to implement this stuff, but I will see you guys in the next video.